Hey everyone, so in this quick video we're going to continue looking at arrays, but we're going to have a closer look at the arrays library, which I did kind of hint on last video, but I deleted it out and I've made a separate video about it. So let's get started. So I've got my program started up here. I've created my class and all of that, and the first thing I want to do is import my arrays library. So let's import java.util.arrays. Okay, so this imports the library so we can use extra features of arrays while using Java. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a simple array. So I'm going to make it of type integer. Remember, open and close square brackets. Let's zoom in so we can see it better. Open and close square brackets to tell Java it's an array, and then name it. Let's call it nums, and I'll make it equal to, and then I'm going to fill the array myself. So just some random numbers in here. Doesn't matter if they repeat, it doesn't matter if they're in order. Okay, so we've got this here, and we talked about last video about how we could make a for loop and just say int I is equal to 0, and do it while I is, so I didn't want that, while I is less than, I is less than nums dot length, and then do I plus plus, and then the thing we want to do goes inside of the curly braces. So we can just do a sys out and then just put I, and when I run that, and that is quite simple, and we don't actually need the Java library to do that, the arrays library to do that. You can see I've commented it out, and if I press play it will do it, no problem. Okay, now one thing that you will find when you're working with Java, especially if you've worked with Python, if you want to, let's say, print out this array all on one line, and you might do something like this, and it would be a logical way of thinking. So I want to, in fact I don't want to do it there because that's inside of the loop. Let's get rid of that, and I'll put it outside of the loop. So I want to print out this, and I've used my system out.println, and I've put the name here just like I would if I was printing out a variable, and just like I would if I was programming in Java and Python. But if I run this, you will see that I get this. All right, now I'm just going to copy and paste it just so you can see it bigger on the coding screen here. Now this is actually an address inside of memory. Okay, now I'll quickly explain why you get an address inside of memory. Now when you set up this in Java, it's not like when you set up a variable. So when I set up a variable, and if I just called it num and equal to 6, it would basically create a space inside it, a little box like this inside of memory, and it would have an arrow, basically like, well, not quite an arrow, but something like an arrow that points to it, and it would say that is where that value is inside of memory. Okay, but when you create an array, you aren't actually pointing to memory. Okay, what you are actually pointing to is a reference to somewhere in memory. So when you actually ask the computer to print out nums, the computer will print out what nums is, and the nums is something that is pointing to an address in memory, and that address in memory is here. So that is what is happening there. Okay, now don't get too confused by that, or don't get too panicky if you don't understand that, because it shouldn't really come up in your exam. But just so you know that it's printing out the place in memory rather than the actual memory, or rather than the actual data that is in a piece of memory. Okay, now to combat this, what I do is I use the array, or the arrays I should say, and I'm going to say dot to string. Okay, now if you look down here, there's a whole bunch of options you have, and I'm just going to pick, it doesn't really matter which one I pick, but I'm going to pick the the integer one, okay? And then in brackets, what I want to change to string. And so arrays.toString, and then in the brackets nums. And when I play this, you'll see it comes up, and it still doesn't look quite right. It's okay because we've got the data, but it doesn't look quite right because it's got those brackets there. And there is a way to get rid of the brackets too. All right, so I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so I've got space on my screen so you can see me writing. And I am putting, notice where I'm putting this. I am putting it just here, okay, in between the two end brackets. So I'm going to put dot replace, oh sorry, not there, don't want to highlight that. So in between these two brackets here, all right, just there. So I'm going to put dot replace and then open brackets, and you'll see it automatically turns it to 0 for you. Now in here I'm going to put in speech marks, I'm going to put the opening square bracket, and then where the second 0 is, I'm going to replace that with just speech mark, okay? And then I'm going to come out of there, and then I'm going to write dot replace again, and then I'm going to open brackets like I did before, and then in speech marks for the first 0 I'm going to put the closing square brackets, and then for the second 0 I'm going to put just open close speech marks. Okay, so it's basically what I'm doing is replacing every time this square bracket comes up, I'm going to replace it with an empty space. All right, so now if I run this, you will see I get a much nicer looking list. Okay, now this dot replace feature, it's actually quite handy because you can do some pretty cool things with it. So I can maybe say here dot replace again, and then maybe I just want to replace every time I see a comma. Oh, sorry, a second, this is a school announcement.
Mr. Sprossen, please come down to reception. Thank you.
Mr. Sprossen, someone needs you in reception. All right. So I'm going to replace every time I see a comma, I'm going to replace it with, I'm going to open speech marks, and I'm just going to replace it with an arrow. Like that. Okay, so now when I run this, you'll see that it's replaced all the commas with an arrow. Okay, just to give my list a little bit more of a flowing feel to it. All right, now I'll leave that there before the announcement goes off again or people start coming in the room. So just a little quick video about the arrays library and some of the stuff you can do with it to help your program look better and run a bit more smoothly. And I'll see you in the next one when I think I'm going to do two-dimensional arrays.